Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. To get a hold of us, reach out on Instagram at Living in the Sprawl Podcast. We do have a website coming and other outlets for everyone to get in touch with us. We want to thank you for your continued support, and we hope to bring you excellent content here on a weekly basis. So for episode 3, I was thinking about possible topics and wondering when this mass exodus from the Golden State was going to come to a halt. For those of you who don't know, there seems to be a large migration of California residents fleeing the state in droves to places like Idaho or Nevada or North Carolina. Texas seems to be the most popular destination. And it got me thinking about the inverse of that. No, I don't mean the grapes of wrath and coming here fleeing the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, but rather what attracts people to the state of California, to the West in a larger sense. Led Zeppelin may have said it best when Robert Plant proclaimed, "There's a feeling I get when I look to the West." No single word can essentially pinpoint what Zeppelin's frontman was attempting to point out. It's a feeling, a vibe, the air of an atmosphere which prompts people to lead their best life. At least that's what we hope. And part and parcel of that is the spirit of innovation. Silicon Valley, Hollywood, the vineyards of Napa. These are places where people are creating products that the world over consumes. And episode 3 is going to be an examination of 10 businesses that got their start here in Southern California. And for better or for worse, we have to claim them as our own. So we are going to begin today's episode by going to San Luis Obispo, to the Central Coast, where in 1925, the world's first motel was established. So number 10, motels. Yes, it was in the year of our Lord, 1925, when Arthur Hyndman came to San Luis Obispo with an idea in tow. He wanted to set up an area where travelers could stay the night without having to rough it in the forest or campgrounds. Travelers headed from Los Angeles up the coast to San Francisco, which at the time was a 2-day extravaganza, very difficult for a lot of people. Hyndman didn't see the purpose of spending an exorbitant amount of money for what was essentially a work-related trip. I'm not going to label the gentleman Bugsy Siegel before Bugsy Siegel, but there can be no doubt that he had a vision for the future. A future in which businessmen, and later on women, would stay the night comfortably before heading off to either Los Angeles or San Francisco or Sacramento, San Diego. After completing an honest day's work, he wanted California's business-inclined to sleep in a comfortable bed, have access to a shower and a decent shave. In short, a hotel for the modern traveling motorist. And that is where the name motel came about. It's very literally a combination of a motor hotel. Boom, a motel. How novel! Mr. Hyndman was far ahead of his time, and he saw his motel having an inside similar to an old-style Spanish mission. So with the mission San Luis Rey in Oceanside in mind, he had the property, which was to be known as the Milestone Motel, created. And in 1925, the world's first motel came to the surface. and the Central Coast in San Luis Obispo. Now, if you are looking to stay at the Milestone Motel for the sake of nostalgia in 2021, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that is not going to be an option. The motel did close down in 1991. Unfortunately, all customers seeking their vaunted $1.25 a night price tag were not quite so lucky. Today, the property is actually the administrative building of the adjacent Apple Farm Hotel. And if you are interested, hotel rooms begin at a cost of $239 a night. So one of the innumerable contributions to culture, currency, and everyday life in America, and in this case, the entire world, Southern California gave us the first motel, Milestone Motel. At number 9, Jack in the Box began in 1951 and was started by Robert O. Peterson in San Diego, California. As of 2021, there are 2,200 locations of Jack in the Box. No shortage of places for you to get the 99-cent tacos, the sourdough jack, or as the incessant commercials told me about 3 or 4 months ago, their spicy chicken sandwich on a brioche bun. So this is a reoccurring thread in the context of Southern California innovation. Honestly, we could do an entire episode dedicated to fast food. And spoiler alert, there will be other examples of this on our list today. But for some reason, and I do think it all kind of goes back to, there's a feeling I get when I look to the West, Southern California in particular has been an absolute haven for different fast food and just food chains in general. Jack in the Box is an interesting one because if you think about San Diego and see episode 2 in our discussion of the movie Top Gun, if you want my unadulterated take on the gorgeous landscape that San Diego has to offer. But it really doesn't seem like a place where this sort of business might come from. And yet, because of Southern California's vast system of freeways and lack of a centralized public transit system, the car culture and the propensity for businesses like Jack in the Box really advertise to drivers out on the freeway with eye-catching signs and interesting designs, crazy, gaudy colors. Jack in the Box was fostered in San Diego. And so if you think about the advertising campaign of today, you'll no doubt flash to an image of a CEO, esque gentleman in a Brooks Brothers business suit, nice dress shoes, and then an enormous plastic, I'm not sure how we're describing Jack in the Box head, but Jack, the CEO, was not the first idea for the company's advertising scheme. Initially, it was literally a Jack in the Box. You know the type, the old school yank the lever counterclockwise until a clownish figure pops at you from inside of a box, a jack pops out at you from inside of a box. That was the imagery that the company first tried to utilize when they were launching the company. And for quite some time, large images of classical Jack in the Boxes were what the company relied on in order to more effectively sell hamburgers, hot dogs, and the like. Just another example of Southern California innovating and the rest of the country taking its cues from the southern portion of the Golden State. Number 9, thank you, San Diego. Thank you for Jack in the Box. For number 8, we jump headfirst into the world of fashion. No, we're not going to Rodeo Drive, nor are we traveling to Sunset Beach or any of the ritzy seaside communities that sell $700 sunglasses by the truckload. We are headed east. We're headed all the way out to Montclair, which is next to the city of Pomona, the greater Los Angeles area, except it's not technically in Los Angeles. It's actually in San Bernardino County. Why do we go there? To venture to the world's first hot topic. Yes, that hot topic. You might have seen a storefront with the hot red lighting at your local mall over the last, 30 years or so. Hot Topic was launched at the Montclair Mall in 1989 by a gentleman named Orv Madden, who had previously worked as an executive at the Children's Place, which does not seem like a necessarily smooth transition into the world that Hot Topic likes to roll around in. For those of you who've managed to avoid heading into one of these establishments over the course of your life, let me just kind of give you a Cliff's Notes version of what's going on here. You walk into an extremely dark and fairly cluttered store, and they are always located at malls for some reason. There will be music from a contemporary alternative rock act. Used to be like No Doubt. I think today Billie Eilish would probably be playing if I were to venture into a Hot Topic. Once you settle in and you have an opportunity to look at the walls, you'll notice they are festooned with band t-shirts. Everyone from Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. to Slayer, Megadeth, and all the way back to Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin. I used to go to Hot Topic when I was growing up, specifically for this reason, to get shirts of my favorite bands so that I could feel like I was a cool kid coming to school in a Ramones t-shirt. For some of our younger Generation Z listeners who wear nothing but Supreme, Hot Topic used to sell clothes that set societal trends. You could walk in, get a Nirvana Nevermind t-shirt, and a $12 pair of what I suppose you might now call skinny jeans. And simultaneously, you could go ahead and pick up a Scarface bobblehead if you were so inclined, as I may or may not have done. There are unconfirmed reports of this from the year 2002. You could also walk out with Japanese anime-related posters or ironic t-shirts that you might find sold on the Venice Beach boardwalk. So it doesn't sound like I'm praising Hot Topic too much. How did it wind up on the list? Because I think it set an overall mentality, a rebellious without actually having to rebel against anything sort of attitude that permeated the youth culture in the 90s and early aughts. You could listen to Linkin Park scream about being one step closer to the edge before they were about to break without being on the verge of anything close to that yourself. So you could retain the mentality without actually having to embrace the lifestyle. And Hot Topic is a perfect blend of feigned animosity for the sake of status. And that's why it appears here on our list of the 10 businesses that, like it or not, were created in Southern California. So thank you, Mr. Madden, Mr. Orv Madden, for giving the world Hot Topic. My Rage Against the Machine sweatshirt pictures from my study abroad trip to Ireland will always remember. At number 7, we take things into Los Angeles County, to the city of Glendale on the east side of Los Angeles, where in 1945, brothers-in-law Burt Baskin and Irv Robbins created, that's right, surprise, surprise, Baskin Robbins. At the time, these gentlemen had competing ice cream stores, but once they became family, they decided to join up, team up, do a Miami Heat 2010, if you will, and bring the best of their respective establishments together. Today, there are over 8,000 Baskin Robbins worldwide, and you can pretty much buy a pint of one of their famed 31 flavors at your local Kroger's or Ralph's or Safeway or any of the other large-scale supermarket chains. This is one of those where I suppose as a younger person, I just assumed that Baskin Robbins had always existed, that in perpetuity, that name had just magically materialized out of thin air, not realizing that there actually were two gentlemen, and they had the last names of Baskin and Robbins, and they were related by marriage. Very interesting. The real game changer here was in their ability to take the power out of the hands of the ice cream truck driver. So in 1945, America looked a lot different. You actually had a personal relationship with the milk truck driver. And the same could be said for the ice cream truck driver who would tour around suburban neighborhoods and ball fields and playgrounds, hawking big sticks and mocha fudge popsicles until brothers-in-law, Baskin and Robbins, came along and decided they wanted to outdo the ice cream truck drivers. So they came up with what, in hindsight, has to be said to be an ingenious scheme, business plan, way to appeal to customers. They wanted to sell 31 flavors so that for every single day of a calendar month, someone could walk into one of their stores and buy a different flavor. Thus, the best that the world of dessert had to offer at the time. Such an interesting, zesty concept that obviously appealed to people the world over. Otherwise, there wouldn't be 8,000 of these places in 2021. So, you might be assuming, oh, what a great American success story, and the descendants of Mr. Baskin and Mr. Robbins must be rolling in money today, as undoubtedly this is the family business and surely it was passed down from generation to generation. You would be wrong. I'll talk about this a little bit later in today's episode, but the majority of Baskin Robbins today is owned by equity company, equity firm, equity business. I'm not sure. I was a creative writing major. Rourke Capital. This is the first time I'd ever heard of Rourke Capital, and I was hoping, and this is not often the case, but I was hoping that it was the name of an individual. Unfortunately, it is the name of an individual, a fictional individual, Howard Rourke, the protagonist of Ayn Rand's 800-page opus, The Fountainhead, which, you know what, that's a great book, and on a different podcast, I might recommend it. But here, in the context of West Coast, California, innovation, ice cream, it's a little bit strange that such an American company, a formerly family-owned company, would now be run by an outfit whose name is dedicated to the memory of a gentleman so selfish that he didn't want the world to see his architecture because he felt they were not worthy enough to see it for themselves. In any case, Baskin Robbins, brought to us by way of Glendale, California. Misters Robbins and Baskin, grazie. For number 6, we turn our attention to San Bernardino, where Glenn Bell founded a little mom and pop shop that I've only recently encountered, and that is a small regional chain called Taco Bell. Maybe you've heard of it. There are over 7,000 Taco Bell restaurants. Do we call Taco Bell a restaurant? There are 7,000 Taco Bells in the world as of 2021, and the company got its start when Glenn Bell, who was working at a hot dog stand in San Bernardino, observed the massive lines that were pouring in across the street at the Mitla Cafe. Interested in understanding what was drawing the masses to his competitor across the street, he actually went and asked to see how it was done, see what they were doing, and over time, he pretty much stole their idea and began selling tacos of his own. At first, he called the business El Taco before changing it in 1962 to Taco Bell. Glendale opened his first restaurant in Downey, which is not particularly close to San Bernardino, in 62, and an empire was born. Americans had a desire they'd yet to fully grapple with: Mexican food, except at the time there was a nascent streak of racism running through the American populace that told people, if it's Spanish, then it's okay, but we don't want anything that's Mexican. Which is why, for example, in Los Angeles, there's a prominent restaurant that we'll be covering. It doesn't exist anymore, but it used to exist, called the Original Spanish Kitchen. What do they sell? Enchiladas, burritos, things that you would find at a Taco Bell. But because of the era and jingoism, eating something from Spain was okay, but something from Mexico was off limits. So Glendale took the concept from the Mitla Cafe, which is a great restaurant that I've actually been to and will be covered on a future episode of Living in the Sprawl, and made it palatable for a large-scale American audience. I'm not sure if Mr. Bell had any idea that 30, 40 years later, basketball stars Shaquille O'Neal and Hakeem Olajuwon would be arguing over the merits of soft versus crunchy tacos in relation to the restaurant chain that he had created. Nor do I imagine that Mr. Bell would have a great deal to say about the Chihuahua and the Yo Quiero Taco Bell situation, or the fact that in 1993's Demolition Man, all of contemporary society has pretty much sunk into the sea, and the only restaurant left in America is Taco Bell. So citizens dress up as though they were going to the Academy Awards for a grand night out at Taco Bell. The company is headquartered in Irvine. I know because I used to drive by the location when I was growing up in Orange County. And from sea to shining sea and continent to continent, you'll never find yourself too far from a chalupa, gordita, or 7-layer burrito. So, courtesy of Mitla Cafe, more than the hockey assist, the basketball assist goes to Mitla Cafe on the creation of Downey, by way of San Bernardino's Taco Bell. Number 5, put on those blue suede shoes, or in this case, those $175 LeBron James Velcro strapped sneakers, as we head to the scenic city of industry, more specifically, the Puente Hills Mall. The first Foot Locker was born here. That's right, 1974 saw the establishment of the world's first Foot Locker. Those nifty NBA referee-inspired uniforms seem like they've been around for quite a bit longer. But in reality, 1971 is when all of that came into fruition. When the Woolworth Company, which I don't think that's actually a deal anymore, but at the time, Woolworth's was an enormous mega department store chain that sold everything from scarves and house dresses to suits. Think of Forever 21. Well, I guess that's not an apt comparison, as I'm pretty sure that chain isn't long for this world either. But when I say big department store, I have an idea that you guys understand what I'm talking about. So Woolworths wanted to get into the shoe game. So they bought up a big company at the time called Kinney Shoes and began trotting out different store concepts, ultimately settling in on Foot Locker in the year of our Lord, 1974. And this particular mall, I've actually been to this Foot Locker, and the first thing you notice, let's say in comparison to the Foot Locker at the North Park Mall in Dallas, Texas, is there's no gleam on the floor. It kind of seems a bit like the lobby of a second-run movie theater. They still have all the same products, but I guess this is a rough way of saying that particular store could use a little bit of TLC. The Puente Hills Mall, interestingly enough, is not most famously known as the home of the first Foot Locker. Actually, it is the Twin Pines Mall from the iconic 80s blockbuster Back to the Future. And it's really fun. If you're in the parking lot, it looks very much as it did on screen when Doc Brown was demonstrating how the DeLorean worked to a young Marty McFly. But if you actually head inside the real Puente Hills Mall, you will have the opportunity to check out the first Foot Locker. And again, you can get the newest Kyrie Irving shoes, or if you're so inclined, the Kawhi Leonards. But it's not going to feel like you're at the House of Hoops at one of the bigger flagship Foot Locker stores that are located in more mainstream areas of American cities. So why is Foot Locker so high on my list? I feel as though it has an outsized influence in the culture. When I was, 10 years old, I went to a Foot Locker to buy the latest Shaquille O'Neal sneakers, the Michael Jordan sneakers, the Allen Iverson kicks. When Penny Hardaway released a shoe, there I was, wouldn't you know it, at Foot Locker, spending all the holiday money that my parents had given me to cop a pair. So if you look a little bit holistically at the relationship between pop culture, sports, entertainment, fashion, and the way that teenagers dress in this country, you will inevitably wind up scanning the aisles at a Foot Locker. But if you're looking for the Steph Curry shoes, they don't have them there. You can only get those at Under Armour, just FYI. To the fine folks at the now defunct department store chain Woolworths, we send out a big thank you from our Living in the Sprawl gang to yours. Thank you for the opportunity to get those clunky Shaquille O'Neal sneakers when your humble correspondent was 10 years old and played a real lackluster brand of the center position on his elementary school basketball team. Number 4 takes us back to the land of the first motel. Sunny seaside, Central Coast dwelling, San Luis Obispo, where in 1990, the world's first Jamba juice was unleashed upon the public. This establishment, which now has roughly 800 other locations in existence, began as a result of a college project by San Luis Obispo student Kirk Perrin, who wanted to provide community members with access to a healthy breakfast option, capitalizing on the success of things like Body by Jake, the Jane Fonda workout videos from the 90s, or early 90s Denise Austin, 5:30 in the morning, ESPN workout tapes. The company opened its doors in San Luis Obispo, and they've never looked back. Before the Atkins diet, before the South Beach diet, paleo, gluten-free, vegan, any number of fad weight loss options, there was Jamba Juice, which had the same idea in mind. And if you look at the landscape of the way in which Americans eat, even McDonald's now sells salads, and fast food chains writ large have to include healthy options because people care now. The science is out there. Americans, human beings, know the direct effects that a poor diet can have on their health. So when Travis Scott raps about Jamba Juice, everyone knows what he's talking about. We've all been there. We might have had a sibling that had a job over the summer at one of their stores at some point. At some juncture, our diets will probably all head in a healthier direction. And if you look at it from a certain vantage point, you might be able to tie that directly to the advent of Jamba Juice and its impact on America's junk food obsession. The company is now primarily owned by Rourke Capital, the aforementioned private equity group with holdings that balloon to $20 billion in totality. This is a company that has their hands in everything from Jimmy John's and Wingstop to Dunkin' Donuts and even the world of dentistry. So an enterprising college student's business plan turned into something that was basically completely swallowed up by corporate America. But that's okay because we know that folks were well compensated and more human beings have access to the products than otherwise might. So as a mnemonic device, if you want to avoid falling into the pitfalls of sicko mode, embrace the world of Jamba Juice. We here at Living in the Sprawl definitely do, and you should too. So to the University of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, we say thank you for the juice. The subheading of this episode was For Better or Worse. These businesses were founded in Southern California, and we're definitely going to have to lean on the latter portion of the phrase when discussing our third entrant in this list, and that is Denny'S. Although, as I'll explain, in an alternate universe, we might all know that most American of diner chains as Denny'S. So, Denny'S was founded in 1953 by Harold Butler and Richard Jezek in Lakewood, California. A couple of years later, Jezek left the company or was pushed out. In any case, he was no longer a part of the company. And the focus of the business changed from an outright coffee shop to something more ambitious, selling donuts and assorted breakfast, diner-themed food. The name also changed as there previously, or I guess currently, was a chain called Coffee Dan's. So, not wanting to be associated with Coffee Dan's, and where are they now, you ask? The answer is, I don't know. I couldn't find that information. In any case, the name of the business was changed from Danny's to Denny'S in 1961. The company is now a global behemoth with 1,700 stores in the United States. And much to my surprise, I learned that Denny'S has a presence overseas. If you find yourself in Japan and you feel this insatiable hankering for the Grand Slam breakfast, you might very well be in luck, as the business does have a footprint in places like Japan, Guam, Puerto Rico, which is sort of part of the United States, and a number of other countries overseas. What I found interesting in some of my research here was that the business was founded in Lakewood. I've said this a couple times in this episode, and I will figure out a different way to phrase things from here on out. But for those of you unfamiliar with Lakewood, it's a city next to Long Beach. It's part of Los Angeles County, but it's on the southeast. And this is a great example of a planned community. So Lakewood essentially did not exist until a number of businessmen got together and realized, hey, there are a lot of soldiers coming back from World War II, and they are going to be looking to start families. So we need to offer single-family homes that will be within their price range. And sure enough, the dream of Lakewood was realized with a community that was formerly comprised of dirt heaps and nothing. This area was transformed into row upon row of single-family dwellings where veterans could reach out for their piece of the veritable American dream. Also, during my bit of research for this episode, I found that founder Harold Butler wound up in a bit of trouble trying to buy the Caesars Palace Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, and he was kind of cast into obscurity, ultimately selling his shares in Denny'S for $3 million when he previously had a kind of fortune of $70 million, and he passed away of a heart attack in 1998. So pouring out for Mr. Butler. If you actually find yourself in Lakewood, the first Denny'S is no longer there, unfortunately. But if you do make the pilgrimage, you will find one of the most anonymous suburbs in the United States. And no more perfect place for Denny'S to have been founded than Lakewood, California. When I think about Denny'S, for some reason, my mind flashes to the movie The Santa Claus with Tim Allen, where by no means is Allen's protagonist a chef in the movie, but he has to get some dinner for he and his child. And Denny'S is the only place that is open on Christmas. And his son tries to order a chocolate milk. They only have regular milk, and the young boy looks down at the table completely downcast and beaten. And haven't we all had a bit of that on a trip to Denny'S at one point or another over the course of our lives? Number 3, Denny'S, Lakewood, California. At number 2, we've got Guitar Center, founded in 1959 on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood by Wayne Mitchell. There are currently over 260 stores throughout the United States, and with a footprint significantly smaller than some of the other companies that we've highlighted on this list, you may be wondering, why Guitar Center number 2? And I'll tell you. We began this episode with a meditation on Robert Plant's iconic "There's a Feeling I Get When I Look to the West." Music equals creativity, equals entrepreneurship, equals businesses that turn into successful monolithic companies. And as many of you know, Guitar Center, of course, doesn't merely sell guitars. They sell all kinds of musical instruments. I know that I was in a band when I was in high school. It wasn't very good, but it did exist, and I went to buy a PA system from Guitar Center. So that's my own personal anecdotal Guitar Center experience. What I found intriguing in some of my research here is that Guitar Center was not the original name of the company. Mr. Mitchell, envisioning his store as something that would cater to church choir crowds, founded the company as the Organ Store, which to me sounds like a black market operation for harvesting kidneys or something along those lines. Now, whether he realized that or not a couple years in, we can never be completely sure, but he changed the name from the Organ Store to the Vox Store in 1964. inspired in large part by the success enjoyed at the time by the Beatles, who definitely showcased their Vox amplifiers and other related Vox instruments. Vox makes the wah-wah pedal and a number of other tools that I'm sure trained musicians would know much better than I do. But the Vox store, that name didn't last long, because a few years after the name change, the name was again changed, this time to what we now know as Guitar Center, a few years after the first name change. The flagship store on Sunset Boulevard does still exist. Over the years, they've held a ton of concerts at the store, and they actually partnered with Guitar Hero a few years back, where in the game you would be playing sometimes at Guitar Center, attempting to be the eponymous Guitar Hero. The company now has its headquarters in Westlake Village, which seems a little bit antithetical to the spirit of being like a badass guitarist, but that's okay. We celebrate their contribution to Southern California innovation as they have been able to empower prospective guitarists, singers, drummers, and the like all across the globe. Here's to you, Guitar Center. May you not ultimately get swallowed alive by Amazon when they ultimately decide to get into the musical instrument game. At number 1, our final business on Living in the Sprawl's list of 10 most fascinating businesses that, like it or not, were founded in Southern California. There was no way around it, folks. McDonald's. McDonald's was founded by brothers Richard and Mac McDonald in 1940 in San Bernardino, California, roughly 50 miles to the east of Los Angeles. And they founded the company after they'd attempted to mount their way into the restaurant industry with a hot dog stand that was located in Monrovia. But they were trying pretty much to cater to the Santa Anita racetrack crowd, and business was kind of fleeting in non-racing seasons. So they moved out east, and in 1940 launched what would ultimately become the world's largest franchise restaurant. As of right now, we've got over 35,000 stores in 100 countries, and some of the most recognizable imagery of any business in, frankly, the history of the world. Now, for those of you that have seen the movie The Founder with Michael Keaton, I won't go into the protracted battle between the McDonald brothers and Ray Kroc, who seemingly took the company from the brothers and turned it into the monster that it is even currently. But I will point out that both Taco Bell and McDonald's were founded in the same city. Moreover, if we extrapolate the conversation to include other businesses on this list, such as Baskin Robbins and Denny'S, we're looking at a version of a culinary Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, Apple, Hewlett-Packard, Sun Microsystems. In Southern California, Taco Bell, McDonald's, Denny'S, Baskin Robbins. And stay tuned, as there will be a part 2 in an examination of businesses that were started in Southern California. But these were definitely not the only fast food restaurant chains that have their seeds planted in the fertile ground of Southern California. Now, McDonald's is widely known for the big old golden arches, the double M, the Hamburglar, which is his crime spree solely focused on hamburgers. Is he hawking them on the black market, as some people do with secondhand cigarettes, or I have a lot of questions regarding the Hamburglar's motivations and financial portfolio. In any event, McDonald's has to be number one on this list. It's the biggest. Its tie-ins with movie franchises and athletes turned the advertising game on its head forever. When Michael Jordan bit into a Big Mac, that was cool. When you saw Iron Man drinking from a McDonald's cup, that was licensed to anyone interested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that their heroes, too, were also customers at McDonald's. McDonald's employs almost 3 million people across the globe. Tales abound of celebrities, CEOs, people that you've heard of who got their start working at the French fry station at a McDonald's. I think about Beavis and Butthead working at Burger World, which is a clear homage / ripoff of McDonald's. And the influence of McDonald's cannot be understated. They have shaped dining across the globe forever. I was in the Golan Heights on the border of Israel. Sure enough, there was a McDonald's. I was in an airport about to board a flight from Sydney to Christchurch. There was a McDonald's. There was a McDonald's at the airport in Athens, Greece. There was a McDonald's the first time I ever drove from Southern California to Arizona in Blythe, where, of course, had to stop at a McDonald's. Have you heard the Wesley Willis song, Rock and Roll McDonald's? I could go on and on and on, citing the influences and various pop culture associations tied in with this gargantuan company. But I won't do that, and I won't belabor the point regarding the tumultuous history of the company. Watch the movie The Founder if you're interested in that. What was in the water in Southern California in the 1950s? I'm not entirely sure, and we can't be certain, but we can surmise that, as was the case with Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant, there was a feeling that people got when they looked to the west. We want to thank you very much for listening to Living in the Sprawl podcast. You can find us on Instagram at Living in the Sprawl podcast, or send us an email. This is the first episode where I will mention our email address, as we have just created it. Living in the Sprawl podcast at gmail.com. Interested in covering a certain topic? Write us. Have we gotten something wrong? I'm sure you will go ahead and write us. We are interested in engaging with listeners of the podcast and would very much love to hear from all of you. On behalf of our lovely and talented producer, Lisa Lowe, I am your humble correspondent, Jon Steinberg, signing off for everyone here at the Living in the Sprawl podcast crew. We look forward to seeing you next time, where we delve into some of the more fascinating aspects of Southern California culture and history, and we both learn a thing or two. See you next time.